Who on Who? The podcast devoted to the review of classic series Doctor Who DVDs in no particular order.
Greetings, fellow Doctor Who fans, and welcome to a She Went That-A-Way edition of Who on Who, the podcast devoted to the review of classic series Doctor Who DVDs, as always in no particular order. But if you've been following the show recently, you know that we are actually following an order. We are doing the Trial of a Timelord season or series, depending on what side of the Atlantic you are on. And this episode, we will be discussing Mindwarp, which is the second episode of the Trial of a Timelord. And as always, I have a special guest with me from over there, actually in Germany, but originally from Scotland, Mr. Graeme Sheridan. Graeme, welcome.
Hello, and good evening. Well, it's evening where I am at the moment. Good morning where you are.
Yes, evening for you, morning for me. We're actually working out the time difference. And while we have the curtain pulled back here, let me just say that I'm using a new microphone. It's a desktop microphone instead of a headset mic, so if my audio cuts in and out, it's most likely my fault because I'm still getting used to parking myself right in front of the microphone. If there is any sort of audio difficulty, I apologize. I'm just trying to work out some new things here with the podcast. And that being said, let's talk podcasts a little bit, Graeme. You have one and are also making your way, making your rounds, if you will, because I just heard you on the latest edition of Doctor Who Podshock as well. So go ahead and let the listeners know a little bit about your projects and what you've been doing.
Well, as you asked me, I didn't actually have too many projects on the go, but since you asked me, there a few things have come together as well. Now, my own projects. I have two podcasts myself. One's called my first podcast was it's called the B Movie Invasion. It's a podcast about classic sci-fi. So that's any science fiction 25 years or older. And then I'll just pick a subject from any science fiction area. So it could be book, TV, film, or audio drama. But it has to be it starts 25 years ago or older. So, as an example, I could review a modern Doctor Who episode because the first episode was shown in 1963 on the 23rd of November. So, on top of that, I've got the project that I call Professor How, which is my Doctor Who parody. Now, I've just gone through the first story. The stories are divided in the classic Doctor Who way of 4 episodes per story. So one episode goes out per month. And I've just recorded and released a Christmas special, which is now available on iTunes and on TalkShoe ID 59601, and on Podcast Alley. What I do with this is I try to do an impersonation of the Doctor, but then remove myself from all the problems I'd have with actually doing a proper Doctor Who names podcast as such. When you start doing scripts and special effects and all this sort of stuff, and if I was doing a proper Doctor Who drama as such, then I'd have to try and use the TARDIS and such forth. And to avoid all this sort of licensing problems, I've decided to do a parody and make all my own sounds for this instead. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing that I'm involved with is, it was I say bolt out of the blue, but a very welcome one. Louis Trapani from Doctor Who Podshock sent me a direct message tweet the one day, saying that he hadn't heard from their Germany correspondent Christian for an awful long time, and would I be interested in doing it? So since I just started getting into podcasting and building up my my pieces of equipment I'd like to use, I said automatically said yes, and got in contact with a few people here, like the Doctor Who fan club here in Germany itself, and to find out bits of news and trying to pressure the BBC Germany company into getting Doctor Who, what is available on iTunes in the United Kingdom and in the United States, that they get it onto iTunes here, because there's a lovely section, original on-air English TV shows. Mm-hmm. So we get things like, there's the Mighty Bush, you might have heard of. It's a surreal British comedy, and there's the third series of Red Dwarf on there, and things like Top Gear, and they've obviously never been released here in Germany on any sort of TV channel here in Germany, but you can download them through the iTunes. So, it's stuff like that, and release news, and when stuff's been shown on the TV itself here in Germany, on which channel and roughly what times, and also news for meetings as well, because there's often in Germany we still have a semi-strong, I say strong, there's an American presence still from the American forces in southern Germany. Here in northern Germany, where I live, there's still a British presence, and if there's ever a fan of Doctor Who in either areas, either the north or the south, from the English-speaking areas, if they would like to actually go to a Doctor Who meeting, I give the sort of the announcements or the news of where the meetups are and roughly what times in what city. So that's roughly the projects at the moment. Mm-hmm. Apart from maybe little ideas I have now and again. I tried entering the Doctor Who online competition there to write a script for them to produce, but unfortunately the guy who won, he got 3 scripts in, so he obviously had a higher chance to win that. But I'd written a script called The Last Ice Warrior, and just a bit of fun there. So it was the 5th Doctor with Tegan, and they just dropped off Turlos to visit the bridge somewhere, was the basis, and the Doctor had been pushed to go to Mars by the Time Lords to go and check out the population of Ice Warriors, because they were kind of concerned. They were quite sure that there was only one Ice Warrior left, but the computers were having problems, so they weren't sure if there was one left or they were extinct. The twist of the tale was that the Doctor had gone to Metabilis 3 with Tegan, and she picked up a sonic hairdryer there and defeated the Ice Warrior with not even realizing, by using the sonic hairdryer as a weapon. And then the Doctor's like, we'll have to cover this one up, won't we? So I might produce it sometime, but at the moment with the Professor Who parody, it is the fact that I do it alone. All characters I do alone, which means I have to come up with new character voices, Doctor's impersonations. At the moment, I've started with the second Doctor's period, but the Christmas special is
Christmas
the 10th.
was the 10th Doctor, yeah, because I just listened to it yesterday, and I thought you were spot on with your 10th Doctor, and I loved the parody on Captain Jack as well, the Captain Jill. I thought that was quite funny. So.
And I called him, I didn't want to go with the Harkness thing. I called him Captain Jill instead of Captain Jack, because there's a Jack and Jill sort of story. That was sort of a memory from childhood. And then you've also got things like, I thought, well, Harkness, hang on, it sounds like Loch Ness. Now that'd be a bit of fun, wouldn't it? So, but there's another podcaster, he's known as Robert Kerry King to all out there. He does the Doctor Who review today. He came up with the idea of the guesser for that, and guesser is my for Professor Howe, the master character. Mm-hmm. And his problem is that he has a bad memory when it comes to words, and he's called the guesser because people are literally having to guess what he's on about, what word he's connecting, and it's something I have a problem with myself. I speak as say jokingly, bad English and bad German. And that's part of the problem. I'll be sat talking to somebody, whether somebody's English or it's my parents or my sister, and I'll forget a word, and it will really annoy me, and I'll sit there. So the guesser comes quite naturally, some sorts of ways. But as you kind of guessed, the guesser was a bit coherent for a change. So yes, that's how the Christmas special came in. So there's as you heard yourself, David, there was the bridge in and the bridge out, where the bridge in is the doctor character in Professor Howe being the professor, telling Captain Jill about the first episode, which is the Analog Women, which is my parody on Cybermen.
Right.
And then you've got the bridge out, which is bridging to the next story, which I'll be doing in January, which is the Mice Warriors, which to any hardened Doctor Who fan will be an obvious nod to where that idea came from.
Right.
See.
So, but very enjoyable. I remember you emailing me I think a few months back about it, about your plans to do it, and I thought that it sounded very interesting. But the key there is being able to pull off the voices as well as you do, and I think that really helps a lot. But it is a very enjoyable podcast, and can be found, like you said, on iTunes. I guess you said you can find it also on Podcast Alley.
Yeah.
And where else?
Podcast Alley and TalkShoe. TalkShoe is this wonderful service for people who want to do podcasting. You need a microphone and a set of headphones, and all the software is practically online. You can download little extra. There's a pro version, and they tell you how to get hold of free software. You can use it in all three computer formats, or the main three computer formats. So it doesn't matter if you've got Macs. I've got a Macintosh if you're on Linux, or if you're on the dreaded Windows. There's all three are covered there. They have they call the Pro client, and it's also used by yourself occasionally when you've got the time. And it's used by Doctor Who Podshock to present their live shows. Right. So when there's as Waters of Mars. Was been on the television. There was about a week or so later, giving people a chance to watch it and join in. There was the episode that they did through TalkShoe on there, and I think I might have to join in with that one. I think
Cultman Audio uses TalkShoe as well. I'm pretty sure that they do.
Cultman Audio and the new Cultman Collective podcast with the Sixth Doctor and Mr. Dave AC, and Dave is quite kind enough to turn up to a few of my podcasts. The only problem I have doing actually joining with the Cultman Collective myself is obviously my work week starts on a Sunday and they go out on a Sunday, so it's where I've got maybe a Sunday off, or I've just got back in from work and I'll join maybe later in the podcast. But yes. And it's kind of hard speaking about Waters of Mars because I've got the Waters of Mars David Tennant figure staring down at me in his orange suit.
Ah.
Because that's like I mentioned there. Yes, on the Waters of Mars Podshock special. I've done my own. There was for the Doctor Who magazine. There's a top 200 list, the 200 Doctor Who stories in order of fan greatness as the fans like them, as a poll. And I did my own little top 10, but then I took one episode from each of the Doctors to make it completely fair. And I previously had David Tennant down at number 8 with The Next Doctor. But as soon as Waters of Mars came out, not only did it completely blow that out of the water, replacing The Next Doctor as my favourite Doctor Who episode for David Tennant, it also placed The Genesis of the Daleks at number 1 in my list. So the Genesis of the Daleks slipped down to number 2.
Wow.
Which, Genesis of the Daleks is something I hold dear. It's my first Doctor Who memory. I was 3 years old when that was on the television. So, and then I got to see, luckily, around about 96, through Sky Television's channel UK Gold, It was over a Christmas period in '96. I got to see it once again in its entirety, along with Hitchhikers, which I absolutely adore as well. So, yeah. So, do we want to crack on with a bit of news that you may have?
Yes, I'm ready. I think what we're going to do now is, like I do with every episode, is go into the email bag.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
Before, all right, I've got one email here, and before I go any further with the email, would like to point out to some of you that are downloading the enhanced version of the podcast. I believe I forgot to mention this in the last episode, and so my heartfelt apologies to Dave Hingley, who you all know that I love and appreciate very, very much, all of his hard work and his efforts. Dave has done some custom artwork for the Trial of a Time Lord series, so you will see actually the Who on Who character, which is a cartoon representation of me, rather than dressed as the Fourth Doctor with the long scarf, he's actually dressed like the Sixth Doctor with the little glass of carrot juice there. And Dave has also created a new email logo for me. So quick look, don't wreck your cars if you're driving right now, but look at your enhanced graphics there on the podcast, and you'll see me dressed as, I believe he said it was Postman Pat, and it was a character from a show over there in the UK. I had to Google it. I didn't know anything about it, but did like the picture, and it's got a black and white cat there next to me, and I have a black and white cat here at the house who coincidentally is named Yoda, which is another science fiction thing we won't even go into, but my wife appreciated that as well. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read this. This email, actually, I owe an apology to Benjamin Elliott. He sent me this email back on November 18th. This is regarding my review of City of Death, and I meant to read this on the last podcast, but in a way I'm glad I didn't, because it's the only one really that I have to read today. But it goes as such. Hello, David. Heard your new episode today looking at City of Death. The only DVD to date to have any reference to my This Week in Doctor Who column, he says in parentheses. I like the episode. If there were any technical problems, you covered them well. That's very generous and very polite of you to say, Benjamin, because there were some horrible technical difficulties, mainly with me having a cold at the time and having to stop and edit and post every cough and sniff. For me, listening back at it, it was excruciating to listen to, because I knew right where every pause was, and certain words were cut out and that sort of thing, or so, I guess maybe half cut out. But anyway, he continues and says, I think it would be useful to make sure that the original DVD releases get their attention before some of them get replaced with new editions and lost in time. For instance, I remember seeing the Spearhead from Space DVD for the first time in 2001, enjoying both the great picture quality and how it had extras that were at the level of many feature films coming out at the time. And then he says, so much better than a lot of other TV shows of the era. I've heard the DVD and its contemporaries mentioned in podcasts lately, but not kindly. Oh, I've heard that DVD, excuse me, my wrong emphasis there. I've heard that DVD and its contemporaries mentioned in podcasts lately, but not kindly. They deserve a defense. I'll step up for them if nobody else will, especially Spearhead. Looking forward to your next show. Benjamin, thank you very much for taking the time to email me. I always appreciate that when people send me any sort of feedback at all. It's nice to know and get some sort of confirmation that there are people out there listening. But I agree with you. Unfortunately, I'm probably not organized enough to be able to keep track of what is or isn't a second release unless it clearly says special edition on it, in which case I will attempt to be very clear with the listeners as to which version it is that I'm reviewing. I do have Spearhead from Space, the original that you're talking about, and I believe I have a couple others as well. I think Louis Trapani and I reviewed Vengeance on Varos, and I was a little surprised at the lack of DVD extras, and Louis kind of clued me in and said, well, this was one of the first ones to come out, and it was before To Entertain got a hold of it and started adding a lot of the things that we've grown accustomed to on the other DVDs. So I do think you have a valid point. Unfortunately, I think I'm just going to have to plow ahead and use whichever one is at my disposal at the time. Unfortunately, when newer DVDs are released, my tendency, if you will, is to go with the newer ones because of the extra features and because I think people are going to be more inclined to want to know if it's worth going to the store and spending their money on. I would imagine the older ones people will have already bought if they were going to buy at this time. At least that's sort of my take on it. Graeme, if you...
my point on that, it's quite a valid point, I suppose, in the first place, because you've got to realise that the DVDs are being redone as To Entertain gets around to it. So they've managed to get a little more, maybe a little documentary extra to put through. It's like the TV film. Now, I'm actually holding off buying the TV film with the Eighth Doctor until the new version comes out and see what difference will be. I mean, I'll still be able to get hold of the old version. I was rather disappointed when I bought Remembrance of the Daleks with Sylvester McCoy, that literally 2 weeks later the new version came out with the double DVD disc, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
So it's a very good point. Also, the other side of things, okay, Spearhead from Space, it's one of those lucky ones that does happen to be on iTunes in the UK. It's quite odd that every time that I get back to the UK now and again, that I'll switch over to the UK store and then maybe buy the one or two stories there. That so far all I've ever bought are John Pertwee stories. Mm-hmm. But Spearhead from Space and Carnival Monsters were the first two that I got from there. So the actual part of the buying process was I actually looked up online to see how many extras were on the DVDs and was it worth actually buying the DVD itself. To that point, by Spearhead in Space, there's next to no extras on it, and Carnival and Monsters, there's not much difference. So I just basically saved the couple of pounds stroke euros on those purchases, and Time Warrior is much the same. So one of the first releases, if I can get it through iTunes, I'll buy it through there first if I'm ever back in the UK to allow me to do this. But yes, it's a very valid, very good valid point. For example, the Five Doctors. Okay, the reason I bought the Five Doctors was on the first DVD, which was the unaltered original broadcast. There's a little extra in there. If you go to the commentaries section, and you tip left with the arrow key, not left, right with the arrow key, you get the little Doctor Who logo lights up in green. And that is the David Tennant, Julie Gardner, and I keep forgetting the producer's name.
Phil Collinson?
Phil Collinson. And it's their commentary on the Five Doctors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after watching the Five Doctors a couple of times through the normal version, I sat down and watched it with this commentary on it, and it was the reason I bought it in the first place. I liked the new version with the special effects and that on it, but just to get that commentary in the first place, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite DVD Easter egg that I've found on any of the Doctor Who DVDs so far is that commentary, and actually did review that edition of the Five Doctors in one of my episodes, and just love it. I mean, that is you were talking about Genesis of the Daleks for you.
Yes,
the Five Doctors is my very first Doctor Who that I ever watched, and I loved it. Because
you'll hear that in the commentary that David Tennant didn't actually get to watch it on the night that it went out. He had to go and do something, so his neighbours had a video recorder and recorded it for him. Mm-hmm. And not only did I watch it that night, but I had it taped. My father taped it for me on the video recorder, and I must have watched it about 30, 40 times, up and down.
Uh-huh.
It's where my interest got pricked because everybody, well, apart from Lewis, who does the diplomatic thing on saying his favourite Doctor is whoever he's watching at the time, that's where my interest was pricked about the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, and he has actually within time become my favourite Doctor of all time. I was lucky today that the little package came in the post, and for the moment my DVD collection for Patrick Troughton is now complete, with the Tomb of the Cyberman now arriving. My father was so kind enough to order it for me because the prices here in the United Kingdom and in Germany, well, in Germany, they're not really affordable. The Tomb of the Cyberman, now usually something that old will cost you around about €10-ish, probably less, way less, like €7. Now, this thing was sat at €72, and it keeps going up in price.
Wow.
And I don't know what was up with it. But my father spotted the US edition on the British Amazon site, which was going for about £5 and something. So I said, well, since my PS2 and my DVD player can play them, and of course I use VLC on both my Macs, on my Mac Mini here on the desktop, and my ancient iBook. I can play them back there without problems. So that was sort of the thing, because I was looking at the extras, and the extras the same, so I wasn't too miffed about that. But you saying about the City of Death, or Benjamin Elliott mentioned about the City of Death. Your review of City of Death was the reason I bought that DVD.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'd been meaning to buy it for ages, and it gave me the kicking reminder. I was like, and then watching the extras, realizing that this entire story had been written by the Douglas Adams.
Yes.
And that's another US copy of a Doctor Who story I've got, because you couldn't get it anywhere else at the time, which was The Pirate Planet, which was written by Douglas Adams and shown to be written by Douglas Adams. And that's a US edition, but unfortunately all the extras on that are completely missing, because it was a Warner Brothers original edition.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this: when you watch a US DVD,
yes.
However you do it, does the picture look unusual to you at all?
No, because my TV is it's one of these lovely European firms called Philips. I've always bought Philips TVs, and as long as I do the correct setting on the PS2 doesn't have a problem. It converts it straight to a power signal, so I don't see any pitch difference. But my normal DVD player, I literally have to push the NTSC button so that it then sends it to the TV as an NTSC signal, and the TV then shows it as an NTSC picture.
Okay.
So I don't see any difference. But if it was doing, some DVD players do that NTSC to PAL conversion, and you get a lot of very bad colour correction on that, where reds tend to be this sort of magenta colour instead of being true reds and stuff like that. But that should all change with the Blu-rays and stuff. But I haven't got Blu-rays. That's still something for the future.
Dave Hingley sent me a copy of the television movie of the Eighth Doctor, because I had mentioned once before that I hadn't seen it since it was originally broadcast, and of course we can't get it here in the States, and so as a surprise it showed up in the mail one day, and the only way for me to watch it was with VLC on my computer, and the color was great. The picture was good. There was just something a little off about it, and I assume it was because it was a PAL.
That was due to the time it was actually broadcast, because it was made in the United States. Well, let's say made in the United States. It was made by Fox in Vancouver, and of course Canada and the United States use the same system. So then it was imported over here. Well, I say over here to Europe. And for some odd reason, at that time, the actual transference of the film from American format to British or European PAL format tends to put a little off colour, so reds look a little bit magenta and stuff like that. So that's why that's so oddly coloured, possibly. But we're looking forward to next year. There's the 2010 re-release of that, which I'm looking forward to. As long as it's not part of some major big box set, I'll buy it like that. But yes, I find it a little odd. It's probably because Fox has been sat on the rights for it for ages and not known really what to do with it.
Right, yeah.
Problem.
Well, I'm
BBC have rights. Yeah,
I'm hoping that they do release it here when they do that this year coming up.
Because they're too entertained, they release it, but because it's too entertained, still goes through Warner Brothers as releasing agents proper. That's probably where the conflicts lie, because it's Fox and Warner Brothers. Oil and water doesn't mix.
Yeah. Unfortunately. All right. Well, listen. Let's plow ahead here. Before we go to the DVD review, just have a couple bits of housekeeping that I need to bring up. Folks, if you haven't been to the website, I need you to go out to www.whoonwho.com. We've updated the graphics on the website to for this time of year for the holiday season. There's a little Santa Claus hat on my head and some snowflakes, courtesy of Mr. Hingley. And if you will look on the left-hand side of the main page of the website, you'll see a link. It's a donate link. And originally, when I'd started the website and the podcast, I had created some T-shirts and that sort of thing to help cover some of the cost. And after thinking about it and mulling it over quite a bit, have realized that $20 for a T-shirt, American, may be a bit much. Anything would help. So the donate button is sort of just a shameless way to ask for any assistance from anyone who feels not obligated, that's not the right word. Anyone who feels inclined to do it, please just click on the link there. You can donate via PayPal, even if you donate $1. Anything would help. If every listener donated $1, then that would cover the cost of producing the podcast and keeping the website running and all of that for a good amount of time, and it would be much appreciated. And anybody who does, of course, I will recognize here on the show. So getting all of that nonsense out of the way, let's go ahead and set the TARDIS controls for October the 4th, 1986. This is the Doctor's 145th adventure. As we said before, this is Mindwarp, the Sixth Doctor and Perry. So hang on, here we go. This is, like I said, an adventure with the Sixth Doctor and Perry. This follows right on the heels of Mysterious Planet. This was written by Philip Martin and directed by Ron Jones. The Doctor and Perry find themselves on the planet Thoros Beta, and which turns out to be Syl's home planet from Vengeance on Varos, who I loved Syl. I thought he was a very interesting character, and I kind of knew that he would be back, but I had forgotten that he would be back in the Trial of a Time Lord. So it was a nice surprise to see him when I was watching this as well. The colors and everything that were used, of course, we'll go into this when we discuss the extras that they used, paint box and some things that they had just gotten around to being able to have the technology to use. But the alien planet looks amazing, given that this is 1986. What were your thoughts, Graeme? I mean, we're talking the pink water and the...
It's very Grateful Dead psychedelic.
Yes.
was my sort of the first impressions I got. A lot of fans would probably be put off at this point there. But you keep slugging through this part at the beginning, because it's the build-up towards where the story really starts to take off.
Right.
They also come back to it later, but we'll mention that later on, eh?
Yeah, and I think that it makes the planet seem less like a quarry or a beach, and much more alien, which I think tend to take for granted now, watching the new series on the very few occasions that they've gone to off Earth to another planet, and we get to see things that are fantastic, courtesy of the new age special effects, and all of that was in its infancy back then. So
this effect was actually reused later on for Sylvester McCoy's first adventure as well, to paint the skies.
Oh, okay. For Time in the Ronnie?
Time in the Ronnie, yeah.
Which, is a much maligned story, but I have to stand up for it and say that I enjoy it only because I really do like McCoy as one of the doctors, but it's not his best story, obviously, but we'll get
it's not his worst one either.
I know, it's not his worst one either. I guarantee you that, yeah.
I find it, I thought it was a good little jaunt there, but we're getting off topic.
Right. Anyway, so we find out that we are on Syl's home planet, and the doctor, in self-defense, has to kill a creature called Rock, and there's some experimentation going on with by a Dr. Crozian, who is attempting to preserve or extend the life of Kiv, who's an alien of the same race as Syl. Kiv is I guess the financial genius who keeps the money rolling into to the planet and all that, and they want to extend his life, and he's having some issues with his brain, and they're talking about moving the brain to a new body, and that's sort of the subplot that's going on in the background amongst the whole trial scenario, where the doctor is being accused of his actions against the planet, against his own companion, just everything. I found this to be, I found the trial scenes to be a little less distracting this time than they were in Mysterious Planet.
Yeah.
But I also felt that that we never really got a clear-cut answer, one way or the other, on what at this. It's, to me, it was kind of like, all right, stay with me here if you're a Star Wars fan, okay? My favorite Star Wars movie is Empire Strikes Back. But the only problem I have with Empire Strikes Back is it does not have a beginning, it does not have an end. It ties Episode 4 and Episode 6 together. It's a fantastic movie in its own right. This kind of reminded me of that. This is moving the story along. It's getting us to where I know we need to end up going. And keep in mind, this is still my first time watching the trial. So although I know certain facts, I have never seen the coming episodes. So there are certain things that I may or may not be aware of that I know are coming up. So I know this is progressing the story, but it was frustrating to me because there was no payoff at the end, or the payoff to me was not satisfying.
Just to put a point in there. I found it kind of interesting when they go back into these courtroom scenes here. The amount of different names that the Doctor comes up with for the Valeyard, including the shipyards, the breakers yard, and such other words. But just a little point: the trial leader, not the Valeyard himself, but the actual presiding judge, played by a woman called Linda Bellingham. Is probably known in the UK more famously as the Oxo Mom. Now, Oxo Mom is, Oxo, the product Oxo, are little cubes, stock cubes of the beef variety. And she was very well known for being in the adverts there, and also being in, there was the TV series All Creatures Great and Small, also which starred the Fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, as James Herriot's second. Now, they also had the problem there with changing actresses, as the original actress couldn't come back, and she played the second Helen Herriot as well in the TV series of All Creatures Great and Small.
Okay. Now, it sounds to me like See, over here we have a fair amount. We have a lot of commercials in our television, and unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be now with DVR technology and all that, most of the time we fast forward through the commercials just to get back to whatever show we're watching. But I don't recall. I've seen footage of actors who have started out in commercials. And they'll show a commercial from, say, 5-10 years ago, and you'll say, "Oh, wow, that's Tom Selleck before he became Magnum PI," or whatever the case may be.
Courtney Cox in the Pepsi advert.
Yes, exactly, things like that. But nobody ever really gained notoriety for commercial work. Now you're mentioning her as being the OXO mom. I know that. Oh, geez, his name escapes me here just for a moment. The actor who played Rupert Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Anthony Head.
Anthony Head, yes. Anthony Stewart Head.
He actually had a similar thing, I guess, with some coffee commercials or something like that.
Yeah, Nescafe.
Yeah.
The Nescafe brand of coffee over here. But Anthony Stewart Head, he's one of those actors that you see in lots of things and hear in lots of things. He was also in the musical version of Chess that originally came out back in 1983. He's like one of those people. He's like Linda Bellingham. You see their faces all over places, but their names, luckily their names are one of those ones you actually know. Unlike a review that I did with a guy that I know from the Cultum Collective yesterday on my own podcast. We did the K9 Company DVD as a review, and there's a guy in there who he played a farmer, and he was known for his face, but not for his name. He was also known through the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series as the announcer at the end of the restaurant at the end of the universe, Max Cordalpleen. But he's been in all sorts of things. So yeah, it's people like that. They pop in back and forth through different things. You see them now and again. And when they pop up, for me personally, it brings a little warm feel into my heart because it's somebody I recognise and have fond memories of. Such things. I thought she, as the as you can say, the judge in this case. I thought she did a really good job because it was a different character than she was used to be being portrayed as.
Yes.
Sort of thing. Just to the point of Syl and his race. Before, to give anybody an idea, anybody familiar with Star Trek: The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, they don't look the same, but they have a similar sort of not appearance, but the way that they are. Syl and his race to the Ferengi I found. Their love of money and transactions and all that sort of thing. And considering this was out 2 years before Star Trek Next Generation, or a year before Star Trek Next Generation came on screen, it's things like that you can see where they maybe got ideas there from. Because, of course, this came on to PBS a bit later.
Quick backstory for anyone that's interested, but about 10 years ago, right after my wife and I were married, we went to Las Vegas together, and they had a thing there called the Star Trek Experience, and it was an amazing thing. It's recently been shut down, unfortunately, but they had actors there in costume while you're waiting in line to get into this who would interact with the crowd. They had a Klingon there, and I have a friend... I have a friend in Florida where I was living at the time who spoke Klingon. He and his brother were huge Star Trek fans, and I had said to him jokingly, I say, hey, if I run into a Klingon, what do I say to him? How do you say hello? And he told me what to say. He said it doesn't really mean hello. It means what do you want, because Klingons don't have a greeting, per se. But there was a Ferengi there as well, and my wife, not being a Star Trek fan, she wanted somebody to take our picture and gave her camera to the Ferengi, who was quite happy to take it and walk off with it because it's like, oh, and he walks away with it, and I had to send the Klingon after him to get the camera back. But about being in character. Yeah, they were very much in character, and the Klingon actually knew the phrase that I said to him. and a very large man in all that makeup, and very imposing too. But they were fantastic. But yeah, I would say that Sill's race is very much like that. And I had made myself a little note while I was watching this. Wouldn't it be great to see Sill again in the new series, or to see Sill's race in the new series with the new special effects and everything that we could do? Wouldn't it be great for the Doctor to run across them again at some point?
I have to wait and see there. I mean, the actor who played Sill really played it up. You have over in the United Kingdom something called pantomime, which is like a Christmas tale of, they'll do things like Jack and the Beanstalk as a stage production, especially for kids and that. And it's literally that sort of acting that they do there. It's very over the top, hammed up to the nines, and sometimes it can be quite amazing to behold. But don't let it detract you from any sort of the storyline itself. It's part of the fun.
Yeah, very much. And of course, we'll go into this later, but in the commentary, they're very complimentary of that particular actor's performance as Sill. And even, back, he did such a great job on Vengeance on Varos that Philip Martin said, I got to bring him back. I have to. Of course, I think he was involved in both stories. So, but anyway, moving on a little bit, we also get to meet a warrior king named Yakarnos, who I knew about because I had read basically Perry's history on the internet and had discussed with other people, and so I kind of knew who he was, but was not at all what I pictured this guy to look like. Brian Blessed plays the part and plays it very, very well, but was not the guy that I thought Perry would end up with, and
it's a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, and we'll discuss that a little bit here in a second, but they also run across a character named Dorf, who has been, who was a warrior of Yakarnos' people, and has been mutated into, for lack of a better term, really a werewolf, but not so much. More similar to what happened to Perry in Vengeance on Varos. I think he's become half canine and still half himself. But the makeup itself being very good, but the performance just really sold it. I mean, this is probably one of the better, if you want to call it werewolf, television werewolf portrayals. I mean, you can see the agony and the sadness in his eyes, and the feeling of helplessness. When he whines out the words "help me," to them, he has become something that is vile to himself. And it was just what an awesome job the actor did on that.
You can see him fighting. The actor doing this internal fight between the sort of the Wolverine side of himself, the animal side, and then his human. It's sort of whatever for a race he is, but I'll say human for lack of a better word. His human side, quite literally at loggerheads in conflict with each other, fighting for dominance there. But
and you see it all in his eyes too. You don't have to. There doesn't have to be any exposition. They don't have to say much about it. I mean, you look at this guy's face, and you can see the torture in his face. I mean, he nailed it. He really did. But the story progresses with the Doctor seemingly turning on Perry and siding with Sill. And that's kind of, of course, the story. We'll go into the story culminates with the end of Perry as a companion being her death, and this is very damning evidence for the Valyard to have against the Doctor. So it makes for a very gripping story. But it makes for me a very unsatisfactory story because we don't know how much of this has been manipulated in the Matrix. At least I don't, not yet. We have two possible endings for Perry. She either did die, or she lives happily ever after as a warrior queen with Yukarnos, which we'll find out later on in trial. But I do happen to know that fact. And honestly, I would almost rather have left her dead. I say that because I know that Nicola Bryant feels the same way. So because of the way it was shot, because of what happened to Perry, that last image of her with a shaved head, which, by the way, I know she's not listening, but Nicola Bryant's probably the only Doctor Who companion so far, except maybe Captain Jack, who could still look great with a bald head.
I mean, to that point, now most people would moan about Perry as a companion because she's whining the whole time. Well, she didn't really start whining until you get into the Six Doctors period, as most people pick up on. But this was a chance for Nicola Bryant to actually show her mettle, to show what she's made of, to show that she can actually do a completely different character from what she was known for. I mean, I heard one or two people saying her American accent's not that convincing. I don't know. I have met Americans that have sounded exactly like her, and after usually sort of LA types. Where she picked the accent up from, I suppose. But you sometimes hear a step out of accents. Yeah,
that's really what it is, Graeme. It's not. I mean, as a born and bred American, I can tell you her accent itself is not bad. But what happens is occasionally her pronunciation of certain words or her use of certain words slip in, and that's very British instead of American. Like, I don't know if she does this, but here it's an elevator, there it's a lift, and I believe at one point she says lift, and she wouldn't if she was an American. She would say elevator. So
it's also part of the script editor. The script editor very much at fault for that, because you've got to realize when you're watching this, maybe as an American yourself, if you're looking at this is originally shown on the British television channel. And at that point, when somebody's watching the UK, they may be slightly aware that a lift is an elevator, but it's little points like this. And these scripts go through I say very, but they go under a great scrutiny.
Sure.
And taken quite literally underneath the microscope at certain points, that due to politics within the BBC itself, would this be understood by a British audience? So they literally have to take it back to its base, so that everybody, so they're literally thinking from the guy with the IQ of 70, would he understand it, and not just the guy who's got an IQ of 130 or whatever. So they're basically looking at that. Can it be understood to the audience? And of course, there's a lot of political. This is where stuff like PC started. The political correctness started. This was the 80s is where it started. Mm-hmm. And you got to realize when she says something that's completely out of character for an American to say, I'll be taking the rubbish out instead of the garbage. It's because of this that a British audience associates the word lift quicker than they would the word elevator.
Sure. Yeah,
stuff like that.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that, but you do have to play to your target audience, and the target audience at the time was the UK. I mean, they had. I'm sure they were aware that Doctor Who was a phenomenon over here in America, but let's face it, it was a cult phenomenon, and those of us who watch it and who watched it at the time, they knew it was a British show. So I mean that's something that you just sort of have to look past and accept.
Because it was on PBS, and if you're watching PBS, it's not one of the mainstay channels in the States. There, it's your local television network who are always going on little charity. I could say it was best described as charity-run telethons there to actually get new programming in, because they're literally they have their only the stuff that they're given. Or the stuff that they can afford to buy themselves. So yeah, but yes, that's quite literally sort of my sort of ideas behind that. But yeah, Nicola Bryant shows herself to be an excellent actress, being able to purvey something else other than just a straight American, annoying American that we got to know. It's probably part of the old politics that was back there and then at the time as well.
Well, I think that her character, when you sort of look back over, now I've never seen Planet of Fire when she was introduced. Not yet, but through the stories that she was in that I've seen and through knowing what her character biography is supposed to be, I think that she was one of those characters that just sort of got brought in with an intention, and that intention changed as they felt they needed to say sex up the show a little bit. You know, obviously she is a very attractive woman, and still is, you know, to this day. But she is so she was definitely brought in for that. Perry, the character, was supposed to be a botany student or a botanist of some kind, and I don't know that if that ever really played in that much. And
not really. No.
And you're right. I mean, her reaction to the regeneration, to everything that was going on with her and the Sixth Doctor, and then I still we talked about this last in the last Who on Who, but her and Colin Baker's decision as actors to lighten the tone between Perry and the Sixth Doctor and make it evident that they'd been traveling together longer, and there was a more of an affection for each other at that point was their decision, and they fought for that, and it was such a welcome change to get past the whole bickering and yammering back and forth, because as viewers we have to sit back and go, okay, why are they still traveling together? I mean, surely at some point the Doctor could drop her off somewhere, or she could just say, all right, look, stop this ride, I want to go home. You know, I'm done with this. You know, if this is the way things are going to be. But
that's exactly what Tegan did.
Yeah, exactly, right. And they talk about this again later on. I think Nicola Bryant talks a little bit about knowing that her character was leaving and wanting to go out literally with a bang, and not go out the way that Janet Fielding's character went out when Tegan left. But I liked Tegan's exit because there was more closure. Whether you agree with it or not, it was on Tegan's terms. It was her idea to say, okay, I'm done. Thank you very much for the experience. Have a great life, and that was that. And I would almost like to see the Doctor revisit Tegan now to see where she is.
Well, and, to that point, David, this is it's a rather, well, I won't say terrible, but Big Finish Productions, who have the license to make the classic Doctor Who as an audio drama, New Adventures. There is one out there with Tegan, where the Doctor actually goes back and visits Tegan. But
is it good? Have you listened to it?
It's good, but the problem being it was, it was a bit, I won't say depressing. There was a rather sad side to it.
Oh.
There was a real sad side to it. So, it's a sticking point. It was a pity.
That's too bad. Tegan was never one of my favorite companions anyway, but she tops the list of companions from the classic series that I would love to see revisited in the new series. She's not at the top. There are a couple others I would rather see. I would love to see William Russell while he's still alive. I would love to see them, see Ian again. And I would love to see Jamie. Of course, Fraser Hines has been vocal enough saying he'd love to be back on the show, but Tegan's right up there. I really would like to see them address that.
Yeah. To that point, that Big Finish is also doing the Sixth Doctor next year with Jamie as new stories. So
that'll be interesting to see how they pull that off, considering Jamie's not supposed to remember anything past his first adventure with the Doctor. So how.
But they got around it with the last couple of there's another series there called The Companion Chronicles, where they just do a story from the point of view of the companion self, the Big Finish companions. I've got the 2 that are out there. The last one they brought out called The Glorious Revolution, which is Jamie, the Doctor, and Zoe turn up in the middle of I think it was King James. It was where the King Jameses were swapping between each other, and he was a very unpopular king. And the one before that was called Helicon Prime, which I've listened to up and down and up and down and up and down, and it's rather good because Fraser Hines himself comes in with his. I got to stop myself from breaking into the same impersonation myself, but his impersonation of the Second Doctor, which is fairly accurate.
Oh wow!
You know, and these are not just well worth buying, but also well worth listening to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, getting back to the Tegan thing, I don't know how much you want of a spoiler on it, but the sad point to it is the Doctor finds that Tegan has brain cancer.
Oh wow!
Has a tumor. And she's unwilling to let him help her get it removed. So it tugs on the heartstrings very much. You know, for a character that you found maybe as a child very annoying, she becomes at this point somebody to be pitied as such, even though she doesn't want the pity.
Right.
So yeah.
Wow. Well, this story. Getting back to Mindwarp here, this story has a lot going for it. I don't know that if I got some feedback from one of the guys at Radio Free Scarro said that he had listened to the last episode and was glad that I didn't just bash the trial of a Time Lord. No. And that's not really my way. I mean, I will be critical where I think I should be critical, but fair. And while I didn't enjoy this one as much as Mysterious Planet, I did still enjoy it. And so I think I gave the last one 3.5, and I'm pretty sure on this one I would still give this one. I'm probably giving this one 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Because
same here.
Okay, all right. Because it does move the story along. I thought the courtroom scenes were better realized here, going back and forth in and out of the story. The tension was good. I loved the look of the alien planet, although I admit with you it was kind of like the Who, kind of psychedelic, pinball wizard kind of look to it. But,
Grateful Dead.
Yeah, exactly. But it still was nice to see something that alien that the TARDIS landed on, and so I would give it props for that. I had to chuckle that the wonderful special effect that opened Mysterious Planet of the dilapidated space station out there where the TARDIS came in. They reused that, or at least part of it, in the beginning of this one. I don't know. You can tell me. Do they reuse it on every opening coming up here in the next 2 DVDs? I would imagine because I'm sure they're trying to set the scene. Or at least the location of the courtroom scene. But and I'm sure they want to get their money's worth out of it because it cost them quite a bit to film that. But all in all, still a good story, not a great story. It's got some holes and it's got some problems with it. I wish we had been told definitively what was going on with the Doctor and how much of it is true and how much of it is. And I'm hoping that maybe we are to an extent later on that we're kind of filled in, but I get the feeling we're not, just from commentary and things like that, which we're going to discuss here in a bit. But definitely a 3 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, also from me a 3 out of 5. But to my point is, it's all part. If you really have to watch this as the trial of a Time Lord, keep in mind that this is all building up to something later on. And the fact is that this basically build up the suspense for this episode. It's trying to basically, for the Trial of Time Lord series, is building the suspense up, because then this is showing the Doctor in a bad light. It's showing the Doctor, even though we know that the 6th Doctor can be more than a little rough. It shows him very uncharacteristic. Even for the 6th Doctor, very uncharacteristic. So you are pondering and wondering whether this has been fiddled with or not, because he admits himself through this that he hasn't got much of a memory of this, because they literally, as you see towards the end of the fourth episode, of the fourth episode, he's been pulled away, against his will.
Yeah,
so,
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did like that they finally showed where, at what point he was pulled into the trial. So I did like that.
Which, of course, he gets very angry about, quite understandably, from my point of view. But it does. These sections only get better. The next story is probably the favourite from most people who watch the series.
Okay.
At the time of the trial of the Time Lord. But points for this: Brian Blessed, the actor, for most U.S. citizens, would probably be only slightly vaguely familiar if you've ever seen the 1980 film Flash Gordon with the Queen soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Now he played the king or the leader of the Hawkmen.
That was Voltan or whatever his name was.
Yes. That is Brian Blessed, even though you wouldn't probably recognize him. But even Brian Blessed will admit that he has 2 volumes, quiet and overbearing, and this is the point. But yes, if you want to see Brian Blessed in any other place, look at the 1980 version of Flash Gordon, and he comes in later as the Hawkman, the leader of the Hawkmen.
Only if I absolutely have to, because I do remember seeing that movie when it came out, because my father used to enjoy the original Flash Gordon, and says, we got to go see Flash Gordon. We went and saw this movie, and really walked out of there for the most part thinking, okay, I preferred Buck Rogers over Flash Gordon, and the only great thing about the movie was the soundtrack from Queen. I was about it until Highlander came along, and then I thought Queen outdid themselves. But anyway, yes, I had heard that he was in there, and one review that I read said he was basically playing the same character again for Doctor Who. But
yes, I could agree with that. Yes, you could do, because he does. He's literally when you bring Brian Blessed into a show, you're not bringing in whatever character he's supposed to be playing. You bring in Brian Blessed, and he plays the same character, just at different volumes. It's that I'm trying to remember who the actor. He was a comedic actor who unfortunately died. He was in Saturday Night Live, and he had the same sort of thing. He says he plays the same character, just at different volumes.
I don't know. Which, how long ago did he pass away?
Must have been about 3. Oh, hang on. Chris Farley.
Oh, Chris Farley, yes.
Chris Farley. I knew it'd come back to me eventually. Yes. But he admitted that his character, just the same character, just at different volumes.
Yeah.
So Brian Blessed is much the same sort of style of actor. He plays the same sort of character, just at different volumes. So
I did enjoy him though, and I'm glad that he just wasn't what I pictured. When I had read that about King Eukarnos, I was picturing the 6 foot tall, chiseled, Adonis sort of looking guy that Perry would end up with, and not this big blowhard, but you can kind of see them playing off each other very well throughout the story. So, it added a little bit to the credibility of what we will talk about in the special features here in a moment. But anyway, if you don't, do you have anything else you'd like to add on the story before we move on to the DVD extras?
Not that I can. Well, not from my notes here, anyway.
Okay.
I think that was about the parts. It was just the Brian Blessed and Linda Bellingham with the sort of maybe the little inside extras for anybody who lives outside of the United Kingdom or has never lived within the United Kingdom, border to the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
All right. Well, we will be right back after this, and we will be discussing DVD extras.
Here we are at the TARDIS Tavern to witness the mating ritual of the Nerdus Maximus Primate.
Say, pretty lady, I've got an Enterprise NCC 1701D nacelle in my pocket. Or do I?
Ew.
Ooh, it seems that the female has declined his advances, but the suitor is eager to try again.
Yes, I see you've noticed my Stargate SD1 Con t-shirt that I acquired last year. That's when I became best buddies with the Mr. Dean Anderson.
Excuse me, but I have a bucket that I must be sicking to.
Oh dear, another failure. It appears the Nerdus Maximus will not be able to copulate tonight. But wait, another male has entered the territory. Let's listen in.
Hey, is that a sonic screwdriver in my pocket, or...
Excuse you?
Well, it is a Series 4 screwdriver, modified and given to River Song.
Ooh, aren't you clever? Do you watch Doctor Who?
Yes, and afterwards I come here to the TARDIS Tavern and talk to my friend Sean, and over a couple of pints we talk about our favorite TV show, Doctor Who.
That sounds hot.
Success!
For intriguing conversations about Doctor Who over a pint, come to the TARDIS Tavern. We download it at iTunes or Libsyn.com.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Okay, this DVD actually has a fair number of extras, very much in line with the first disc. And I assume that most of you are like me and probably buy, if you are going to buy this, will buy the box set. This could be the only way it comes. I'm not sure. Is that right, Graeme? Is this the only way to get this?
It's the only way to get Trial of Time Lord is as a complete box set. But the prices, if you look on Amazon, I know here within Europe, if you look along Amazon, don't actually go for the Amazon's own DVD set. Go looking. If you look along the bottom, there's usually another seller there. So you choose one of the other sellers, look for a new copy, obviously.
Right.
And you'll find there that the price is more reasonable because the Amazon price is fairly heavy at the moment still. But you can get Trial of Time Lord, at least here in Europe, for about 18, 19 euros plus postage and packaging. Okay. So it's fairly reasonable in price, but you can't get them separated. But as of all the box sets that are out there, this one is one of those ones that is relatively affordable, in my opinion.
Well, and I'll tell you, if you're here in America, there's another place that you can go. We have a local store that my son Marty works at, but you can go online to www.gohastings.com. The store is called Hastings, and they do. It's similar to an Amazon, but they have a storefront in several cities here in the U.S. where you can actually buy and rent DVDs, video games, books. You can also trade in your old stuff, and they carry Doctor Who merchandise, which was a very pleasant surprise for me, and nice because my son works there as well. But I do buy from Hastings when I can, and I assume that for Christmas coming up that I'll probably be getting something from Hastings because while being a poor college student, I'm sure he's taking advantage of his Hastings discount as well. But anyway, that's another place where you can go. The reason I brought up the box set is because the DVD extras on this should be no surprise to anyone who's looked at the DVD extras on Mysterious Planet. Very, very similar in what is offered in quantity and specifically what is there. We have the first item. I'll run down the menu again. Like I do with all the DVDs, the first special feature is called Making of Mindwarp. And it's basically a behind-the-scenes interview with the stars, with Philip Martin, who talks a lot about the paint box process while they were doing the coloring and that sort of thing. Nicola Bryant, Jim Sangster, Colin Baker, Brian Blessed, which is really nice to see out of all the makeup and everything. The the gentleman who played Crozier, Patrick Reichart, the Valyard, Michael Jaston, Clayton Hickman, who is I believe a TV and film historian, and they used him on the previous DVD as well. So I would assume that it's a safe assumption here that in the following DVDs and documentaries that he will. This was probably all filmed at one time and then cut up into and edited for particular stories. So the only disadvantage to watching these sort of things, these DVD extras, is a lot of times you get a glimpse at what's coming because they assume you've already seen it, or they assume that you saw this the first time it was on TV. So for me, there are things where I'll be watching the extras and I'll say, "Oh gosh." So that's what's going to happen. I wish they hadn't shown me that. But it doesn't happen very often. But just a little warning. So if you have not seen the trial and you're sitting down to watch it the first time, you don't want any spoilers. And I should have said this last episode. Hold off on your DVD extras because while they're great fun and very informative, they're going to spoil a few things for you. If you don't want to be spoiled, I would say wait on those. But they talked to Eric Sayward as well, who's the script editor, and I just can't seem to get past the feeling that he and Colin Baker just didn't get along. A lot of people have said that I'll come to my own conclusion on that later on with some of the other special features and future discs, but just the things that are said and unsaid. I just sort of get that vibe, I'm very sensitive to people and the way. I'll tell you, if you ever want to flip David Huey's switch, okay, just be angry with me and don't tell me why, and it'll drive me absolutely bananas. Mrs. Huey and I, we don't fight because we can't stand being angry at each other. Which is, I guess, a blessing, but. I'm very sensitive to that. So when I see this actor talking, and then I see the guy from behind the scenes, and you can kind of tell from their body language and the way they're talking that I guess they weren't chums. They didn't go out for drinks afterward, that sort of thing. That bothers me, and I sit there going, why? I mean, whose fault was it? And I try to diagnose it. Maybe I should have been a therapist instead of an IT guy. I don't know, but.
Well, there's also the point there that probably it's because Colin Baker is known for being also a bit of larger than life. He may not have been as extreme as Tom Baker, but he was known for being sort of a big personality, you could say, Mm-hmm. So that might have part to play in it. But just sometimes it's one of those weird things. I find it a little, well, I would say distressing, but a little odd that sometimes somebody you've never met, but you meet for the first time, and they will take an automatic disliking to you, mm-hmm. even though they don't know you. Yeah. It's the first time they've met you. I've had this through I was in the military for the British military for 13 years, and this happens quite often. So I kind of just started doing the water off a duck's back thing there, and just let it sort of go in one ear and out the other. But it does happen, definitely within the sort of the British, and I'll say within the British realm of things. It's part. I suppose it's also part of the culture there. You can't really put your finger on it, but it does happen an awful lot that somebody will just take one look at you and know they don't like you, even though they don't even make the effort, which really annoys me, to get to know you in some sort of fashion or other. And they'll just take an instant disliking to you.
That's an interesting insight that it could be a cultural thing. I had not considered that because, see, I live, well, aside from living in America, I live in the South. And in the South, for the most part, people are very neighborly. Most of if you've ever seen the Andy Griffith Show, it's really not too far removed from the way people are more guarded nowadays, but they still will give you the shirt off their back, really. Most people, as a general rule, are very, very friendly and very neighborly. the joke here in East Tennessee is until they get behind the wheel of a car, and then they will not, for whatever reason, let you over into their lane of traffic or anything like that. But
that's East Coast mentality, I think, isn't it?
It could be. It could very well be. But so yeah, it's a little more foreign. We don't tend to embrace the idea of just sort of sizing somebody up. We're all guilty of it. We size people up from, and we come up with our own predetermined, okay, this person is going to be like this or going to be like that. And that's unfair. We're too judgmental, but I'm always willing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. And I've only had a couple times in my life where somebody has pretty much just decided they don't like me. And, it drove me bananas. One guy, it was my first job when I was in high school, and he was one of my, he was the crew chief at the time, and eventually we both became crew chiefs, and we became very good friends, but it took a long time for me to figure out what his problem was, and finally had to get in his face about it and ask him, look, what is your deal, and it really wasn't anything I did, and for the most part, those of you out there, if you experience it, and now we're turning this into a psychology show, I have found that that it really isn't anything that you've done or you haven't done. It's stemming from that person's insecurity or whatever. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what caused the Colin Baker Eric Sayward rift, if it does exist. The way I see it. So I've been told that there will be payoff, that I will get more information. There's just the big telling thing to me on the last DVD was that the audio commentary, Eric Sayward was in a room all by himself. Yeah. And then everybody else recorded together, having a grand time. And so that to me, that was like, okay, hold on. I mean, maybe he wasn't available. I don't know. They could have worked that. It just seemed a little unusual that they would even ask him to do a commentary, but no, you got to do it by yourself. So anyway, the next item on the DVD extras is the deleted and extended scenes. And unlike Mysterious Planet, I thought these scenes were minor. Again, I thought the court sequences kind of helped flesh things out a little bit, but not so much with these particular deleted and extended scenes. Sometimes I almost question why they even bother to put them on the disc. I guess maybe as a point of interest for the true Doctor Who fan that wants to see every nugget of information, but they didn't really add anything to it. Did you watch them, Graeme, or did you?
It's those sort of things. It's like the Two Doctors DVDs, similar ideas on there, and you end up you try to watch them, but you end up sticking it in fast forward and just watching out at double speed.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Just flipping through them. I'm more for the background of the story. If anybody can bring anything new, bits of recording information, that sort of stuff, I'm very much into. Mm-hmm. Or if it was a completely cut scene, then stuff like that. But it's usually little extras, and then you really have to strain your sort of memory to see where the little, maybe a fluff or maybe the little extra bit that's in this scene was, So yeah.
And for the most part, they're just cut for time. Everything that runs long, and then they just have to trim. So anyway, they're there if you want to look at them. If you're the completist and you want to see every extra on every DVD, they are there. The next feature is a Now and Then feature, which normally I enjoy these. They go back and show you the location where they filmed, where it is today. They talk a little bit about... this one was actually a little bit better because it was a lot of information about the history of Doctor Who shooting on location. And they actually talk about when they first started doing location with William Hartnell. They talk about the different types of cameras that they use. And that's really all just sort of building up to discussing the equipment that they used filming this particular story and this particular season of Doctor Who. But it was enjoyable. There wasn't as much, here's where we shot this and here's what it looks like today kind of thing. So that was a little disappointing for me. But I did enjoy seeing little bits. There was a color picture still of William Russell and the cast from the first Doctor's era, and it was interesting to see them in color because it was someone had just sort of taken a snapshot while they were on location. But there little nuggets like that are fun. But for the most part, this was not one of those DVD extras that gobsmacked me, and I said, wow, I'm really glad that I took the time to watch that. A lot of these I watch because I feel an obligation to watch them for reviewing the DVD, and that's almost the least enjoyable part of doing it at times, because I love watching the stories and I love talking about them, but then sometimes the minutia of having to go through and make sure that I watch the infotext, listen to all the audio commentaries, try to find the Easter eggs, do all that sort of thing. Sometimes on some discs it's very enjoyable, and on other discs it becomes very tedious. And this was one of the extras that was kind of like you said, you kind of fast forward through part of it. So, did you watch it? Did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
No, that's about it. I usually enjoy these bits. I'm one of those odd people. I'll watch the extras first before watching the main story.
Oh, really? Okay.
I watch it for some people backwards, but I love extras and I love flicking through it, and I love searching for Easter eggs.
Oh yeah.
But,
and there aren't. I was going to save this to the end, but there aren't any on this disc, and there weren't any on the last disc either. Yeah. And I was very disappointed that they didn't have any. Even like the Trails and Continuity, which is on the special features, they could have made that an Easter egg. It's a lame Easter egg, but they could have done it. They've done it on other DVDs. Well,
there's one. Let's look it up for you a second. I do have a part of my list here, and I've just got to find. I've actually hidden it this time. There's a website out there that will tell you where if you've got fed up with trying to look for your Easter eggs.
Yes. Doctor Who and the video website of evil, that one?
Yeah, it's the www.dwwa.net, and it's then /DWVWE/eggs/eggs.html.
Mm-hmm.
And as they are really good, as new releases come out, if there's any DVD Easter eggs on there, then they'll come up once you've got fed up with trying to search for them yourself.
Yes, it is a great site. Ken Deep told me about it when he was on my show and we were reviewing Inferno, and he told me a little bit about it. So if you didn't get that URL, you can go to Google. You can Google Doctor Who and the video website of evil, and he's got information there about lost stories, about DVDs, Easter eggs. It's a very informative website. And so if you, like Graeme said, if you don't want to go searching for Easter eggs yourself, and your thumb is starting to get a little sore from the remote control, then you can go to that website and they'll at least tell you where the Easter eggs are. So the next special feature is probably my favorite one on this disc. It's a special feature called A Fate Worse Than Death. It's a bit spoilerish because it actually shows, it's a recording of Colin Baker showing Nicola Bryant the alternate ending of Perry's character. It's when the Inquisitor tells the Doctor that Perry didn't really die, that she's living as a warrior queen. Apparently, at the time, Nicola Bryant had no idea that they had done this, and she had never gone back and watched it because to her, watching something after you've been on it is just painful to do. So she didn't follow Doctor Who, so she didn't realize that they didn't leave Perry dead. And she was aghast at it, and I found that very interesting. And I agree with her. I think they should have just left Perry's fate, as terrible as it was. I think it still had much more weight to it than coming back later and saying, "Oh, it never happened." It's kind of like that here in America. We had a primetime soap opera called Dallas. And there's
Bobby Ewing in the shower.
Yes, Bobby. Pam dreamed it all. That whole previous season, and it's like, okay, I'm sure that it won't be quite that lame when I get to it, but I sort of agreed with her dismay at that.
From a Doctor Who point of view, I suppose that what they were trying to do was avoid within the span of a couple of seasons that they had yet another companion killed.
Oh, from Adric, and then on to
Adric, because of the hoo-ha that went on with that.
Sure.
It went down like a lead balloon with a lot of the TV critics and that. So this was their way of sort of like fluffing it up at the end. Oh, we didn't kill her really.
I would argue that as much as people tend to not like the character of Adric, and he has his moments, Adric chose to go out the way he went out, and he sacrificed himself for the greater good, which made him a hero. Where in the case of this particular story, Perry was taken, to this operating table, and 1 minute she's Perry, and then the next time we see her, she's Kiv, and so she doesn't go out a hero, and that's I don't know. I agree. I know what you're saying, and we have to remember that ultimately Doctor Who is a family program. Really aimed as a children's program, but a family program, and so I'm sure that you're right. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, and they were trying to be sensitive to, again, play to their audience and make sure that they didn't upset too many people. So, all right, I'm just going to run down real quick on a couple other things, and then we can sort of flesh them out as we see fit.
Because I'm going to have to head off now.
Yes, I know, and I want it to be. Do you want to head off before I finish here, or
I'm going to have to, because I literally have to be working about 40 minutes or less.
Oh, okay. I'm very sorry. Well, Graeme, let me just say thank you very much for being on the show with me. I appreciate it very much, and I will definitely. Why don't you go ahead and tell the people the podcasts again, real quick? There's Professor How.
So you can find me. You can find me. Well, you can find my podcast on iTunes, but first of all, there's Professor How, which is the Doctor Who parody podcast, and also the B-Movie Invasion, and that is the classic sci-fi podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at twitter.com/the2nd Doctor, or the Second Doctor, and I'm also on Facebook under Graeme Sheridan. I'm the only one there.
Yes, I believe we're friends on Facebook. So
yes, that's right.
All right. Well, thank you again very much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
And yourself, and a Happy New Year to all.
All right. Thanks a lot, Graeme.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, Graeme had to head out, so I'm just going to finish running down the DVD extras real quick. There are no surprises for any of you that are used to going down the typical Doctor Who DVD extra list. There's, of course, the trails and continuities that are announced by the BBC before and after different weekly installments of the program. There's the wonderful audio commentary with Colin Baker, Nicola Bryant, and Philip Martin, which I highly recommend. The info text, as always, is good. It wasn't still, to me, as there wasn't as much juicy background information as I was expecting, but still very good. There's a wonderful Children in Need sketch where several former doctors, including Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, Peter Davison, and Colin Baker are together, along with many ex-companions and Nicola Bryant, where they are donating a check to Children in Need. Just sort of reinforces the bond between Children in Need and Doctor Who that we all know and appreciate very, very much. But that was a lot of fun to see. There was a comedy sketch by a comedian named Lenny Henry. Interesting. Not the funniest Doctor Who parody I've ever seen. If you're pressed for time, you can sort of skim over that one. And, of course, the photo gallery as well. And that brings us to the end of the DVD extras. And it also brings us to the end of another episode of Who on Who. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for taking time out of your very busy lives to listen to the show. Please send any feedback to me directly. You can email me, david@whoonwho.com. You can come over to the website, www.whoonwho.com. We have a forum. We have links there to some other podcasts. We also have a Who on Who store where you can buy swag, or even more importantly, be sure to check out the donate link on the first page for whoonwho.com. And if you feel so inclined, like I mentioned earlier, just to send a small donation in to help cover the cost of the podcast, I again want to thank Graeme Sheridan for joining me today to discuss Mindwarp. Next episode will be Terror of the Vervoids, and I'm very excited about that, as well as having my next guest on from across the pond. So this podcast was originally recorded before Christmas. It probably won't get out until afterward, so I just want to wish all of my listeners a very happy and safe new year. Please have a lot of fun with your family and friends, and we will talk to you again very soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.